In the bustling city of Mumbai, where dreams rise as high as skyscrapers and secrets hide in plain sight, there lived a man named Arjun Kapoor. He was no ordinary man. He was one of the richest people in the country, with an empire that stretched across industries, real estate, technology, finance, you name it. People admired him for his sharp mind and bold decisions. But behind closed doors, whispers about his shady dealings followed him like shadows. Arjun's penthouse on the 45th floor overlooked the glittering cityscape. It was a place filled with luxury marble floors, gold accents, and art pieces worth millions. But even amidst all this extravagance, something felt cold about the space, as if money couldn't buy warmth or trust. That evening, Arjun had invited a group of international investors to discuss what he called the next big opportunity. The air buzzed with excitement, champagne glasses clinked, and everyone wanted a piece of his success. But once the formalities were over, Arjun excused himself from the party. He retreated to his private study, a room lined with bookshelves and dimly lit by a chandelier. Only two of his closest associates joined him, a lawyer and a financial advisor. They locked the door behind them, ensuring privacy. What they didn't realize was that just outside the heavy wooden door, their quiet maid, Meera Devi, was silently dusting the shelves. Meera had worked for Arjun for more than 10 years. She blended into the background so well that most people forgot she existed. Dressed in her simple cotton sari, she moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning, arranging, and serving without making a sound. To the world, she was invisible, a faceless figure who did her job and disappeared. But inside, Meera carried a secret. She understood every word spoken in Hindi, a language she rarely used herself. As Arjun began speaking in hushed tones, outlining his plan to manipulate stock markets using insider information, Meera froze. Her hands stopped moving and her heart started racing. Every sentence hit her like a thunderclap. He spoke about how they would exploit loopholes, bribe officials, and create fake news to drive up share prices before selling off everything at a massive profit. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. And Meera knew it. She tried to focus on her work, pretending not to listen, but her mind was spinning. Should she step away? Should she ignore what she'd heard and go back to her routine? But something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the realization that she held a piece of information that could change lives, including hers, for the next hour. Meera stood there, motionless except for the occasional flick of her cloth against the polished wood. She absorbed every detail, storing it away in her memory like a vault. When the meeting ended, the men left the room laughing, confident in their scheme. Meera waited a few moments before slipping away, carrying the weight of their words with her. That night, sleep eluded her. Lying on her thin mattress in the tiny servant quarters tucked away in a corner of the mansion, Meera replayed the conversation in her head. She thought about her mother, living alone in a small village, struggling to make ends meet. All these years, Meera had worked tirelessly to send money home, hoping to give her mother a better life. And now, here she was, holding evidence of crimes that could destroy powerful men and possibly endanger her own life. The question gnawed at her. What should she do? On one hand, exposing Arjun could bring justice and protect countless others from being cheated. On the other hand, going against someone as influential as him meant risking everything: her job, her safety, even her family. Meera tossed and turned, torn between fear and morality. By morning, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but so had determination. She decided to act, but cautiously. Meera grabbed a notebook and began jotting down everything she remembered from the previous night. Names, dates, phrases, details of the plan, it all poured onto the pages in neat handwriting. She wrote late at night when the household was asleep, hiding the notebook under her mattress during the day. Each entry made her feel stronger, like she was reclaiming control over her life. When Sunday came, Meera took the day off to visit her mother. As the bus rumbled through the countryside, she stared out the window, lost in thought. Villages passed by, each one poorer than the last. Children played barefoot in dusty lanes, women washed clothes in communal wells, and elderly men sat under trees, smoking pipes. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of Arjun's penthouse. Yet it was the world Mira belonged to. Her mother greeted her with open arms, pulling her into a tight hug. "You've grown thinner," she said, brushing a strand of hair from Mira's face. Over a meal of dal and roti, Mira listened as her mother talked about the rising cost of medicine and repairs needed for their leaking roof. Guilt washed over her. Despite sending money regularly, it never seemed enough. This injustice wasn't just Arjun's burden, it was hers too. Later that evening, Mira confided in her cousin Rajiv, who worked as a journalist for a small local newspaper. They sat together under the stars, sharing cups of chai. At first, Rajiv laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when Mira explained the gravity of the situation, his expression turned serious. "Do you realize what you're saying?" he asked, lowering his voice. "If this gets out, you'll be putting yourself in danger." "I know," Mira replied softly, "but I can't stay silent anymore." Rajiv hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's do this. But we need proof, solid, undeniable proof. Otherwise, nobody will believe us." With Rajiv's support, Mira returned to the mansion the next day, her resolve firmer than ever. She continued documenting every suspicious move Arjun made, paying close attention to encrypted files left open on his laptop, cryptic messages exchanged between him and his associates, and even a hidden safe where documents were stored. Each discovery brought her closer to exposing the truth, but also closer to danger. One fateful evening, while cleaning Arjun's office, Mira spotted a USB drive lying carelessly on his desk. Seizing the opportunity, she quickly copied its contents onto another drive she'd purchased secretly. It contained incriminating emails, financial records, and voice recordings confirming Arjun's involvement in market manipulation. Armed with undeniable proof, Mira met Rajiv again. Together, they decided to approach a prominent investigative journalist named Priya Sharma, renowned for exposing corporate scandals. However, Priya insisted on verifying the authenticity of the documents before publishing anything. "You're playing with fire," she warned. "But this could bring down someone very powerful." The next morning, Mira woke up with a strange mix of fear and determination. She had spent the night writing down every detail she could remember from Arjun's secret meeting. Her hands trembled as she tucked the notebook under her mattress, knowing that it held information powerful enough to shake the foundations of his empire. But what now? What was she supposed to do with all this? She decided to take things one step at a time. For now, she would keep observing, watching for anything unusual in the house, listening carefully when Arjun spoke on the phone or met with his associates. Every little clue mattered because, deep down, Mira knew she needed proof before she could even think about exposing him. Just having notes wasn't enough? People like Arjun Kapoor didn't fall easily. That evening, while serving dinner to Arjun and his guests, Mira noticed something odd. A man who often visited the mansion, a tall, sharp-dressed businessman, was whispering urgently into his phone. His tone was hushed but tense, and he kept glancing toward the door as if worried someone might overhear. When he ended the call, he scribbled something on a piece of paper and slid it across the table to Arjun. Mira's curiosity burned brighter than ever. What were they planning? And why did they look so nervous? Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Mira crept back to the dining room. The crumpled piece of paper lay forgotten on the floor near the chair where the businessman had been sitting. Heart pounding, she picked it up and smoothed it out. It was a list of numbers, dates, amounts, codes. Though she couldn't understand everything right away, Mira recognized some patterns. These weren't random digits. They were part of Arjun's scheme. She quickly copied them into her notebook, making sure not to leave any trace behind. As she returned the paper to its spot, her mind raced. This was getting bigger by the day. Each new discovery made her feel more trapped between doing the right thing and protecting herself. If Arjun found out she was snooping around, there was no telling what he might do, yet staying silent felt worse. How could she live with herself, knowing she had the power to stop him, but chose not to. On her day off, Mira traveled to her village to visit her mother. The journey gave her time to think, though the thoughts swirling in her head weren't exactly comforting. She stared out the window of the crowded bus, watching fields and small towns pass by. Life here seemed so simple compared to the chaos she faced in Mumbai. People worked hard, earned just enough to survive, and dreamed of better days. They weren't plotting schemes or hiding secrets, they were living honestly. When she arrived, her mother greeted her with warmth and love. "You're looking tired," she said, pulling Mira close. "Is everything okay?" Mira forced a smile. "Yes, Ma, I'm fine. Just work, you know." But later, as they sat together on the charpoy outside their tiny home, Mira couldn't hold back anymore. She told her mother about how difficult life in the city was becoming, about how lonely she felt, surrounded by wealth that didn't belong to her, about how unfair it seemed that rich people could bend rules while others struggled to put food on the table. Her mother listened quietly, her eyes filled with concern. "Beta," she said gently, "you've always been brave. Whatever is troubling you, I trust you'll make the right choice. But don't forget, you have me. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." Those words stayed with Mira long after she returned to the city. They gave her strength, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Still, the weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. She needed help, but whom could she trust? When she thought of Rajiv, her cousin, he wasn't just family. He was also a journalist, albeit for a small local paper. Maybe he could guide her. On her next day off, she visited him at his modest apartment. They sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping chai as Mira poured out her story. At first, Rajiv looked skeptical. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "If what you're saying is true, then you're dealing with very dangerous people." "I'm sure," Mira replied firmly. "I've seen it with my own eyes. I've written it down, but I need advice. I need someone smarter than me to tell me what to do next." Rajiv leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Okay, listen. If you want to expose something this big, you'll need solid evidence. Notes aren't enough. You need documents, recordings, something undeniable. Otherwise, they'll crush you." Mira nodded. She already knew that. But how was she supposed to get such proof without putting herself in danger? Rajiv suggested she start paying closer attention to Arjun's office. Look for files, USB drives, anything important. Men like him are careless sometimes. They think nobody's watching. The idea terrified Mira, but she agreed. Over the next few weeks, she became hyper-aware of her surroundings. Whenever Arjun left his study unlocked even for a moment, she peeked inside. She discovered encrypted files on his laptop, though she couldn't open them, and stacks of papers marked confidential. Slowly, she pieced together fragments of his operation, understanding how far-reaching it truly was. One evening, while cleaning the office, Mira spotted a USB drive lying on the desk. It must have slipped out of Arjun's pocket when he stood up abruptly during a phone call. Her heart skipped a beat. This was her chance. Without thinking twice, she grabbed a spare USB drive she'd bought secretly and copied the contents onto it. Then she placed the original back exactly where she'd found it, back in her quarters. Mira plugged the USB into her old laptop. What she saw took her breath away. There were emails detailing illegal transactions, financial reports showing fake profits, and voice recordings of Arjun discussing bribes with officials. It was everything she needed, and more. With the evidence safely stored, Mira reached out to Rajiv again. Together, they decided to approach Priya Sharma, a well-known investigative journalist famous for taking down corrupt politicians and businessmen. Priya was hesitant at first, warning them about the risks involved. "This isn't just risky, it's dangerous," she said. "If you're serious, you need to be prepared for the consequences." Mira swallowed hard but nodded. "I am ready," she said softly. "I can't let him win." Priya agreed to verify the authenticity of the documents before publishing anything. In the meantime, Mira continued living her double life, acting as if nothing had changed while secretly gathering more proof. But the closer she got to exposing Arjun, the more she realized how precarious her position was. Strange things began happening. Her bag went missing one day, only to reappear hours later with its contents scattered. Men she didn't recognize started lingering near the mansion gates, staring at her with cold eyes. Despite the growing tension, Mira refused to back down. She thought about her mother, about the countless families who suffered because of greed like Arjun's. If she stayed silent, nothing would change. But if she spoke up, if she dared to fight, she might spark a chain reaction that could bring justice to those who deserved it. And so, with trembling hands and a heart full of hope, Mira prepared herself for the battle ahead. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't give up without a fight. With the copied USB drive safely tucked away in her sari's hidden fold, Mira felt a surge of both relief and dread. She had finally done it. She'd taken the first real step toward exposing Arjun Kapoor's web of corruption. But as she walked back to her tiny servant quarters that night, her mind raced with questions. What if someone noticed the USB was missing? What if they traced it back to her? Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light from the hallway seemed to scream danger. The next morning, Mira woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even risen yet, but sleep was impossible. Her heart thudded against her chest like a drumbeat, keeping time with her racing thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. When she went about her daily chores, she found herself glancing over her shoulder constantly. Was that shadow near the kitchen door moving just a little too deliberately? Did the driver give her an odd look when she passed him in the hallway? Still, she forced herself to stay calm. Acting nervous would only draw attention, and attention was the last thing she needed right now. So she kept her head down, focusing on her work, while silently rehearsing what she would say to Priya Sharma, the investigative journalist Rajiv had introduced her to. Mira knew this was her chance to make things right, to fight back against the injustice she'd witnessed, but she also knew that one wrong move could ruin everything. Later that week, Mira arranged another meeting with Rajiv. They met at a small tea stall near the train station, far enough from Arjun's mansion to avoid suspicion. Sitting on plastic chairs under a flickering fluorescent bulb, they whispered their plans over steaming cups of chai. Rajiv listened intently as Mira described the contents of the USB drive. Emails detailing illegal transactions, spreadsheets showing fake profits, and voice recordings of Arjun discussing bribes with government officials. "This is huge," Rajiv said, his voice low but tinged with excitement. "If we play our cards right, we can take him down. But how?" Mira asked, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her cup. "I don't know anything about journalism or investigations. I'm just, me." "You're braver than most people I know," Rajiv replied firmly. "And you've already done the hardest part. You got the evidence. Now it's up to us to make sure it reaches the right people." Mira nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "What if something goes wrong? What if they find out it was me?" Rajiv hesitated, then placed a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll be careful. We won't let anyone connect this to you. Trust me." Trust. That word felt heavy on Mira's tongue. After years of living quietly in the shadows, trusting others wasn't easy. But she trusted Rajiv. He was family after all. And she trusted Priya Sharma, who had agreed to meet them once the evidence was verified. It was a fragile kind of trust, built on hope rather than certainty. But it was all she had. A few days later, Mira handed the USB drive to Priya during a secret rendezvous in a quiet park. Priya was younger than Mira had expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took the drive without saying much, only nodding briefly before slipping it into her bag. "Give me a few days," she said. "I'll check everything thoroughly. If it's legit, we'll move forward." In the meantime, Mira returned to her routine, trying to act as normal as possible. But the tension was unbearable. Strange coincidences began piling up. One afternoon, while dusting Arjun's study, she noticed a folder labeled "Security Logs" lying open on his desk. Curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced inside. To her horror, she saw entries marked "Unauthorized," Access detected, followed by timestamps that matched the nights she'd copied files from his laptop. Her stomach churned. Had they traced the breach to her? Or was it just paranoia playing tricks on her mind? Either way, she knew she couldn't afford any more slip-ups. From that day on, she avoided Arjun's office entirely unless absolutely necessary. Even then, she made sure to clean quickly and leave no trace of her presence. Things grew worse when Arjun announced a surprise inspection of the staff quarters. "Starting tomorrow," he declared during dinner, "we will ensure the house is secure. Everyone must cooperate fully." Panic gripped Mira. What if they searched her room and found the notebook where she'd written down details of his schemes? She spent the entire night tearing apart her mattress, searching for places to hide it. Finally, she decided to bury it in the garden behind the mansion, wrapped tightly in plastic to protect it from the rain. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than leaving it exposed. The next morning, a team of security guards swept through the quarters, checking bags, inspecting lockers, and questioning everyone. Mira stood frozen, her breath shallow as they rummaged through her belongings. Thankfully, they didn't find anything suspicious. Still, the experience left her shaken. She realized she couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for disaster to strike. That evening, after the guards had left, Mira called Rajiv in tears. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "They're watching me. I feel like I'm trapped in a cage." Rajiv listened patiently, letting her vent her fears. Then he spoke softly but firmly. "You're stronger than you think, Mira. You've come so far already. Just hang on a little longer. Once Priya verifies the evidence, we'll figure out the next steps together." His words comforted her, but not completely. Deep down, Mira knew the truth. The closer she got to exposing Arjun, the more dangerous her life became. Yet giving up wasn't an option, not now. Not when she was so close to making a difference. Over the next few days, Priya worked tirelessly to authenticate the documents. She cross-referenced names, checked bank accounts, and analyzed the voice recordings. Finally, she called Rajiv with the verdict. "It's solid," she said. "This is exactly what we need." When Rajiv relayed the news to Mira, she felt a mix of relief and terror. Relief because the evidence was real and justice might finally be within reach. Terror because the hardest part was still ahead, going public. "Are you ready for this?" Rajiv asked gently. Mir thought about her mother, about the countless families affected by greed and corruption. She thought about the years she'd spent invisible, powerless, and silent. Slowly she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready." But readiness didn't mean fearlessness. As the days passed, Mira began noticing unfamiliar faces around the mansion. Men in dark suits loitered near the gates, pretending to read newspapers or talk on their phones. Late at night, she heard footsteps outside her window, soft but deliberate. Someone was watching her, and she didn't know how much longer she could evade them. One evening, while returning from the market, Mira found her apartment ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, clothes scattered across the floor, and her mattress slashed open. Her heart sank. They were looking for the notebook, or worse, the USB drive. Thankfully, she'd already hidden the notebook in the garden and given the USB to Priya. Still, the message was clear. They suspected her. Shaken but resolute, Mira called Rajiv immediately. He arranged for her to stay at a safe house until the story broke. Packing a small bag with essentials, Mira slipped out of the mansion unnoticed, praying that no one would follow her. As she settled into the cramped but secure room provided by Priya's network, Mira allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about how far she'd come from being an invisible maid to becoming a whistleblower, capable of taking down one of the richest men in the country. It was terrifying, yes, but also empowering. For the first time in her life, she felt like she mattered. 3 days later, Priya announced that the exposed would go live the following morning. The anticipation was excruciating. Mira barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the world would look like when the sun rose again. And rise it did, bringing with it a storm that would change everything forever. The morning the expose was set to break, Mira woke up before dawn. She lay on the thin mattress in the safe house, staring at the cracks on the ceiling, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What would happen today? Would people believe her? Would Arjun Kapoor find out it was her who had exposed him? Each question felt heavier than the last. Pressing down on her chest like a weight she couldn't lift, she got up quietly and walked to the small window of the room. Outside, the city was just beginning to stir. Streetlights still glowed faintly as vendors set up their carts for the day. The air smelled of chai and freshly fried samosas. It was an ordinary morning, but Mira knew that by the time the sun climbed higher, nothing would feel ordinary anymore. Priya Sharma had promised to publish the story at 8 a.m., and Mira couldn't stop checking the clock. At exactly 8:01, Rajiv called her. His voice was shaking with excitement. "It's live," he said. "The article is everywhere, news channels, social media, everything." Mira grabbed her phone and opened the link Rajiv sent her. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the words. The headline read, "Billionaire Empire Built on Lies." Inside Arjun Kapoor's web of corruption? Below it was Priya's name, followed by paragraphs detailing how Arjun had manipulated stock markets, bribed officials, and cheated investors. The article included screenshots of emails, financial records, and even snippets from the voice recordings Mira had copied. For a moment, Mira forgot to breathe. This was real. Everything she'd risked her life for was now out in the open. She felt a strange mix of pride and fear. Pride because she'd done something meaningful, something brave. Fear because she knew the fallout would be massive. Within minutes, the internet exploded. News outlets picked up the story, reporters scrambled to interview experts, and hashtags about Arjun Kapoor trended on social media. People were outraged. Investors demanded answers, politicians condemned his actions, and activists praised whoever had dared to expose him. Meanwhile, Arjun's empire began crumbling like a sandcastle hit by a wave. Back at the mansion, chaos erupted. Early that morning, security guards rushed into Arjun's penthouse, waking him up with urgent whispers. By the time he turned on the news, his face went pale. Cameras captured images of him leaving the building surrounded by lawyers, his usual confident stride replaced by hurried steps. Reporters shouted questions at him, but he refused to comment. Climbing into a car and speeding away inside the mansion, panic spread among the staff. No one knew what was happening or why. Some whispered that Arjun had been arrested. Others claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Mira watched from afar, hidden in the shadows, as the household descended into confusion. She wanted to step forward to tell everyone the truth, but she knew it wasn't safe yet. Not until the dust settled that evening, Priya called Mira. "We need you to come forward," she said firmly. "Your testimony will make the case stronger. Without you, people might doubt the authenticity of the evidence." Mira froze. Coming forward meant stepping into the spotlight, something she'd avoided her entire life. But deep down, she knew Priya was right. If she stayed silent, Arjun might twist the narrative, blame someone else, or even escape justice altogether. Taking a deep breath, she agreed. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." The next day, Mira stood in front of a group of journalists gathered in a cramped conference hall. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted toward her, and reporters scribbled notes furiously. She felt small under their gaze, but she reminded herself why she was there: for her mother, for the countless families affected by greed, and for every person who had ever felt powerless. "I'm Mira Devi," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I worked as a maid in Arjun Kapoor's house for over 10 years. During that time, I witnessed things I couldn't ignore. When I realized the extent of his crimes, I knew I had to act. I didn't do this for fame or revenge. I did it because it was the right thing to do." The room fell silent as she spoke. Mira recounted everything: the secret meetings, the encrypted files, the stolen USB drive. She explained how she had documented every detail, risking her life to ensure the truth came out. Her words resonated deeply with the audience. many of whom wiped away tears as they listened. After the press conference, the story gained even more momentum. Social media flooded with messages of support for Mira. People praised her courage, calling her a hero. Others shared their own stories of injustice, inspired by her bravery to speak up. For the first time in her life, Mira felt seen, not as a maid, not as someone invisible, but as a human being with a voice worth hearing. But while the public embraced her, danger lurked closer than ever. Arjun's allies lashed out, accusing her of lying, fabricating evidence, or acting out of jealousy. Anonymous threats poured in messages warning her to stay quiet or face consequences. One night, someone threw a brick through the window of the safe house where she was staying, narrowly missing her head. It was a chilling reminder that the fight wasn't over yet. Rajiv urged her to leave the city temporarily, to stay somewhere safe until the legal proceedings against Arjun concluded. Reluctantly, Mira agreed. With Priya's help, she moved to a remote village far from Mumbai's noise and danger. There, she found solace in simplicity. She spent her days helping local farmers, teaching children basic math, and writing letters to her mother. Life was peaceful, but she often wondered if she'd made the right choice. Meanwhile, authorities launched a full-scale investigation into Arjun's activities. Arrest warrants were issued, assets seized, and lawsuits filed. Investors sued him for billions, and banks froze his accounts. Within weeks, the once mighty billionaire became a shadow of his former self. Photographs showed him disheveled, unshaven, and visibly shaken during court appearances. Despite the progress, Mira struggled with guilt. She worried about the employees who had lost their jobs when Arjun's companies collapsed. Some of them had families to feed, dreams to chase. Had she caused more harm than good? Rajiv reassured her that these losses were inevitable, that dismantling corruption always came with sacrifices. Still, the thought weighed heavily on her mind. One afternoon, as Mira sat under a banyan tree reading a book, a young girl approached her. She looked about 8 years old, with wide eyes and a shy smile. "Are you the lady on TV?" she asked. Mira nodded, surprised. "Yes, I am." The girl tilted her head thoughtfully. "My teacher said you're very brave. Is that true?" Mira chuckled softly. "I don't know about brave," she replied. "I just did what I thought was right." The girl grinned. "Well, I think you're brave too." In that moment, something shifted inside Mira. For so long she had doubted herself, questioned her decisions, and feared the future. But seeing the admiration in the child's eyes reminded her of the bigger picture. Yes, the road ahead would be difficult, but she had sparked change, and that mattered more than anything. As weeks turned into months, the legal battle against Arjun dragged on. Mira testified multiple times, recounting her experiences in detail. Each appearance in court left her exhausted but also empowered. She realized that speaking the truth wasn't just about exposing wrongdoing, it was about reclaiming her dignity, her humanity, and her place in the world. Finally, after nearly a year, the verdict arrived. Arjun Kapoor was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and market manipulation. He was sentenced to prison, stripped of his wealth, and banned from holding any corporate positions for life. The ruling sent shockwaves across the country, serving as a warning to others who thought they were untouchable. When the news reached Mira, she allowed herself a rare moment of celebration. She cooked a simple meal of dal and roti, lit incense sticks, and prayed for strength and peace. Later that evening, she called her mother, sharing the news with tears in her eyes. "It's over, Ma," she said. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." Her mother's voice softened. "You've done a great thing, Beta. I'm so proud of you." Though the victory brought closure, Mira knew her journey wasn't truly finished. She decided to use her newfound platform to advocate for workers' rights, speaking at rallies and meeting with activists. Slowly but surely, she transformed from a quiet maid into a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest voices can spark the biggest changes. And as she stood on stage one evening, addressing a crowd of cheering supporters, Mira smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt free not just from fear, but from invisibility. She had stepped out of the shadows, and she wasn't going back. Months passed since Arjun Kapoor's sentencing, and the world slowly began to move on. The headlines that once screamed his name faded into the background, replaced by new scandals and breaking news. But for Meera Devi, life would never be the same again. She had stepped out of the shadows, not just figuratively, but literally. Her courage had inspired countless others, and though the journey had been long and painful, it had also brought her a sense of purpose she'd never imagined. Meera returned to Mumbai after the trial concluded, but this time she didn't go back to the mansion or pick up her old life as a maid. Instead, she rented a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a balcony where she could sit and watch the city hum with energy, but it was hers. For someone who had spent years living in cramped servant quarters, this felt like freedom. Her days were no longer filled with dusting shelves or serving meals. Now, she spent her mornings volunteering at a local NGO that fought for workers' rights. The organization had reached out to her after her story went viral, inviting her to share her experiences and help advocate for change. At first, Meera hesitated. Public speaking still made her nervous, and she worried about drawing too much attention to herself. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how important it was. If her voice could inspire even one person to stand up against injustice, then it was worth it. One of her first projects involved visiting factories and construction sites to talk to workers. Many of them lived in fear, afraid to speak out about unsafe conditions, unpaid wages, or exploitation. Meera understood their fear all too well. "I was like you," she told them during one meeting. "I used to think my voice didn't matter, that I was too small to make a difference. But look what happened when I decided to act. Change starts with us, with ordinary people refusing to stay silent." Her words resonated deeply with the workers. Some approached her afterward, sharing their stories and asking for advice. Others promised to join protests or file complaints. Seeing their determination gave Meera strength. She realized that while exposing Arjun had been a victory, the real battle was far from over. Corruption wasn't limited to billionaires. It seeped into every corner of society, affecting millions of lives. And if she wanted to create lasting change, she needed to keep fighting. As weeks turned into months, Meera became a familiar face at rallies and community meetings. People recognized her not just as the woman who took down a billionaire, but as someone who genuinely cared about making things better. Journalists often asked her for interviews, eager to learn more about her journey. While she agreed to some, she always kept her focus on the bigger picture. "This isn't about me," she would say. "It's about everyone who feels powerless. We have to remind ourselves that we're stronger than we think." Despite the progress, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, lying awake in her bed, Meera sometimes wondered if she'd done enough. Had she truly made a difference, or was it all temporary? What if another Arjun Kapoor emerged tomorrow, finding new ways to exploit people? These questions haunted her, but they also pushed her to keep going. Giving up wasn't an option, not when so many depended on her. One evening, as she sat on her balcony sipping tea, her phone buzzed with a message from Rajiv. "Turn on the news," he wrote. Curious, Meera grabbed the remote and switched on the television. A reporter stood outside a factory, speaking excitedly about a recent protest led by workers demanding fair wages and safer working conditions. The camera panned to a group of men and women holding signs, chanting slogans. In the middle of the crowd stood a young woman, her voice loud and clear as she addressed the reporters. "Thanks to people like Meera Devi, we know our voices matter," the woman said. "We won't let anyone take advantage of us anymore." Tears welled up in Meera's eyes. She didn't recognize the woman, but her words touched her deeply. This was why she had risked everything to give others the courage to fight for themselves. Knowing that her actions had sparked a ripple effect filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The following week, Meera received an invitation to speak at a national conference on labor rights. It was being held in Delhi, and activists from across the country would attend. Initially, she felt overwhelmed by the idea of addressing such a large audience, but Rajiv encouraged her. You've already done the hardest part, he reminded her. Just be yourself. When the day arrived, Mira stood nervously behind the stage, listening to other speakers share their stories. Each one was powerful in its own way, highlighting different struggles and triumphs. Finally, it was her turn. As she walked onto the stage, applause erupted from the crowd. Hundreds of faces looked up at her, waiting for her to speak. For a moment, she froze. Then she remembered her mother's words. "Beta, you've always been brave." Taking a deep breath, she began. "I never thought I'd be standing here today," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves. "For most of my life, I believed I was invisible, that my voice didn't matter. But then something changed. I realized that staying silent only helped those who wanted to hurt us, so I decided to act." She went on to describe her journey from overhearing Arjun's secret plans to gathering evidence and finally stepping forward. She spoke about the fear, the risks, and the moments of doubt. But she also talked about hope, the hope that comes from knowing you're not alone, that there are others willing to stand beside you. By the end of her speech, the room was silent except for the sound of sniffles and quiet sobs. When she finished, the audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in admiration. Mira felt a lump in her throat. For so long, she had carried the weight of her decisions alone. Now, surrounded by people who understood and supported her, she finally felt light. After the conference, invitations poured in from organizations and universities wanting her to speak. Though flattered, Mira knew she couldn't spread herself too thin. She chose a few events that aligned with her mission and declined the rest, focusing instead on building a network of grassroots activists. Together, they worked to educate workers about their rights, provide legal assistance, and push for policy changes. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon a post shared by a prominent activist. It featured a photo of Mira speaking at a rally, captioned with the words, "Courage is contagious." "Thank you, Mira Devi, for reminding us that even the quietest voices can shake the world." The comment section was flooded with messages of gratitude and admiration. Some thanked her for inspiring them to take action. Others shared their own battles against injustice, crediting her with giving them hope. Reading through the comments, Mira felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the collective power of ordinary people coming together to create change. Years later, when asked about her decision to speak out, Mira simply smiled. "I may have been invisible to them," she said, referring to the wealthy and powerful, "but I saw everything. And sometimes seeing is all it takes to start changing the world." Her work continued, but so did her personal growth. She reconnected with her mother, bringing her to live in Mumbai so they could spend more time together. They often cooked meals side by side, laughing and reminiscing about the past. Mira also found joy in simple pleasures, reading books, tending to plants on her balcony, and occasionally treating herself to a movie. Life wasn't perfect, but it was fulfilling in ways she had never expected. Though she had started as a quiet maid in a billionaire's mansion, Mira ended up becoming a symbol of resilience and courage. Her story served as a reminder that heroism doesn't always come wrapped in capes or grand gestures. Sometimes, it's found in the quiet determination of a single individual deciding to do what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And as she looked out at the bustling city from her balcony one evening, Mira allowed herself a rare moment of contentment. The road ahead would still have challenges, but she was ready. After all, she had already proven that even the smallest voices can echo louder than the biggest lies.